So I'm changing how I work with Angular components, and in this video I show you exactly how and why. Hint, it involves standalone components and inline styles and templates. Hey everyone, I'm Zoeb Khan and I'm a front-end engineer. Welcome back to my channel. This video is a sort of a precursor to my next set of tutorials in Angular. It's important because I'll go over the changes I've made in my working style with Angular components and why I felt the need to do so. So let's get started. We're going to use Angular version 14 since the standalone components were introduced in that version. Once you have that installed, we go into our terminal and run the following CLI command: gnu journey planner, and for the style, we are going to that it can compile Sass files. Great, so this is going to take a bit of time, and let's say that we don't want Angular routing here. So just get some water or a snack and enjoy it, and I'll be back. So once the terminal shows the app is ready, we're just going to go into our folder and then write code. Great, we have our app open in our VS Code, or you could use some other IDE of your choice. So next, as I said, we are going to use standalone components in our app now, and for that we need to do a few modifications to the generated app. We're going to go in app, we are going to remove our app module. The second thing that we need to do is to go in our main.ts file, and here we want to change this bootstrap module to bootstrap application. Okay, this is imported from Angular platform browser, and we are going to use the app component, which is the base component that we have. Let's remove all of the unused imports here. And the last thing that we need to do is to go in our app component, and we need to make it into a standalone component. Great. Let's also remove the unwanted code that we have here. Great. So voila, we have a standalone app with no ng modules. Now I wish that there was some schematic for that. If you find one, please comment below. And why did we remove ng modules? Well, I've already explained why in a previous video exclusively on standalone components, so check that out in the link above. Great. Now let's create a new component. As I mentioned before, I'm going to change my style when working with components. Until now, in all my projects here, I'd been using the defaults by the Angular CLI. This creates separate files for the template for the component and the style for the component, along with the TS file, which is the class. Now with standalone components, our projects get leaner with no ng modules, as you saw, but we can do better by making our template and styles inline as well. First, let's see how we can create a standalone component with inline styles and the template. Now to do that, we simply do the following command. So ng generate component. Now this is standard as before. We are going to create all our components in our components folder, and let's call it a place search component because that's what we'll need in our future tutorial. And the first thing that we need to do is to just use standalone true, which is going to tell it that okay, this component is standalone. Then we are going to tell it that we need an inline style for this, and we need an inline template for this. Also, we are going to use the flat option. This is going to not create a new folder for that component. And the last thing that we need to do is to do skip tests. Okay, great. So as you can see, it creates a new component in a single file here. And when we open it up, we can see our template is in one section here, which can be scaffolded, and our styles are in one section here. And then we have our code. Now, what are the pros and cons of using the inline style and templates? Now, the first thing is that there are less code files, and so it is easier to find and change. So for example, if we were finding this component, when you have multiple files, what you need to do is you need to go place search, okay, and I'll need to see where I need to make the change. So for example, if I need to make the change in the HTML for the place search, I'm going to find out then some HTML here, or if I go in styles, I need to look up the styles but this is an extra thing to think about. So this is a cognitive overhead. Now with a single file, we can make all changes for that specific component in one single file, so it is easier to locate and easier to change things here. Now as a side effect of this, development is faster as well. So I can, for example, add something in the template here, and then I can quickly come back here to declare some variable here, and I don't need to switch between files, and so it is quicker. The third thing is that we can make better use of the IDE refactoring tools. For example, the rename option in VS Code. Now, if we assume that we create a variable here in our class and we need to use this variable in our template here, and we write it like this, and assuming that we need to use it in multiple places like this, and then out of the blue we find out that we need to change it because it's not suitable, it's not a title. So we can use the F2 utility here, which is the rename symbol utility, and we can change it to some other title. And since because the variables and the template is in the same file, we can actually change it in all places that is being referred. This is much easier to do than before. The last thing that I could think about is the lines of code. So here, when you see the lines of code in our component, this accurately represents the size of the component, since the component is a combination of the template, the styles, and the TypeScript. And this actually forces us to reconsider our component's design if it gets too large. Now with separate files, it often gets a bit difficult to judge and to calculate, okay, how big your component has become. And this often results in huge template files, especially because they are in separate files and we don't get to know that, okay, this is part of that same component, and it becomes very difficult to maintain later on. Now this is all in good and it seems to be all good, but nothing is without its problems. So the biggest problem that I found with inline styles and templates is that your component file can get quite big because it has a template and it has the styles as well. But if you can keep your component size small, this issue shouldn't come up much. Second thing is that you can also use scaffolding. So if you have a large template and if you have a large styles section, you can maximize it here, or minimize it when you don't want to see it and when you just want to work on the code here. So this sort of minimizes the issues that you get with the large code file here. One other small irritant is that since VS Code doesn't recognize the template code and the style code as an HTML and style file, it doesn't give some of the nice helpers that come in with a separate file. So for example, if I go in my app.component.scss file, and here if I write the same style, and if I do display flex, it gives me different options. So there is flex and there is block, so I get different options here. But if I do the same thing here, you will see that I don't really get that nice drop down effect because it doesn't recognize it as a styles file. The same for a template. But if you're willing to live with this issue, and if it's not that important to you, you might be okay. But if you find this really important, you might want to keep using separate files. So for me personally, and a lot of other developers as well, using standalone components like this with the inline style and the templates seems to be a match made in heaven. It brings out about a more lean code structure and helps you develop fast as well. But it also forces you to keep an eye on the component size, so ensuring that your components remain maintainable. Now to make it easier to use these options, we can add them to our default component schematics. Otherwise, running this very big command every time can be a bit of a problem. So to do that, what you can do is we can just go in our angular.json file, and when you go in your schematics for your application, generating a component, we have a new just a style option here, but here we are going to add standalone first of all. This will be true. The second thing, we'll add inline style, and we are going to add inline template, true as well. Also, as before, we can also add flat because we don't want to create a new folder for just a single file, and also we want to do skip tests here. Great. Now for skip tests, you might not want to do this obviously for more production level projects, but I do it for all of my tutorial projects, and if I have to test something, I can always add the files when I need them. Great. So now that we have our schematics ready, we can use a simple ng generate component, and we can do in our components file, and let's say we create a card which shows the place for my journey planner, and we can just click enter here, and you can see it uses that, and it uses the same schematic, and we get an out of the box standalone component with inline templates and styles with the same format as before. So this is my default style that I'm going to be using in my future tutorials now. And let's look at our file structure. We can see that we have our components really clean. There's nothing else, no modules, no templates or style files. So what do you guys think? I'd love to hear your point of view as well. Do you like this lean style, or do you prefer the old way of using a separate template and a separate style file? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.